Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Big Data London webinar. So today we're doing a lockdown special part 2. I'm Andy Steed, Content Director of Big Data London, and I'm joined today by Vic Muscat. Hello, Vic.
Hiya.
Hi, Jez. Hello, Jez.
How you doing? You all right, Andy?
And Graham McDermott.
Afternoon, Andy.
Yeah, so I mentioned that it's a part 2 of the lockdown. Part 1 happened shortly after everything stopped, and we were looking at things like the challenges of working with the enforced social distancing and accessing systems, and maybe business operations being closed or partially closed. I think we're past that now, or we're in the midst of that, and people are dealing with it. What we'd like to look at today is a different set of opinions on how we return back to as close to normal as we possibly can in the upcoming weeks. So we'll be going to Graham, who's Chief Data Officer at Addison Lee, for his opinions on what data leaders are thinking about, and what's his concerns, and how he'll be doing it moving forward. Jez will be looking at sort of careers and the job market, and we'll come to Vic at the end for some thoughts on well-being and how we look after ourselves and look after our teams. These sessions are designed to be interactive, so please send in any questions you have using the questions function on the webinar. The more the better, really, and I'll ask as many as I possibly can throughout the course of the broadcast. But firstly, I was going to go to you, Graham, if that's okay, and just to sort of frame the talk and frame your opinions. I was looking to sort of cast a mind back to that week in March, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, when we were all looking at lockdown, and lockdown was inevitable. It was happening in other countries. It was all over the press, and it was all front of mind for everybody. What did you think was going to be the big, the biggest thing from your aspect as a data team? As for your data team, what did you think was going to be the big struggle for you and your team?
I think it's a really interesting question, because I think as an organisation, we had sort of in the last 4 or 5 years, in particular, had sort of modernised a lot in terms of technology, in terms of people, in terms of our office environment. We'd only just moved offices in the previous 18 months. And actually that office move was a catalyst to modernising the software and hardware we had. So actually we were pretty ready across the board. Okay, no one's going to have their whole call centre and certain other areas fully laptop up and an ability to work from home. But actually, we were pretty close, and we got to 100% work from home within probably days, frankly, without too much scurrying around. And I think for my data team, and this is probably true of my sort of previous data teams, is that we sort of adopted what I prefer to call flexible or agile working rather than purely work from home, because you can work anywhere. I've had people in my team in the past that have worked from India, from Japan, not necessarily permanently, but on a temporary basis, or people in hotels or wherever. So actually, it's just the ability to operate in a sort of professional way wherever they happen to be at the time. And I think so as a team, I think we were quite well set. We'd practiced flexible working. We sort of each knew how to work flexibly and how to probably manage our own team when they work flexibly as well. So you don't sit there worrying all day long, I haven't heard from person X, what are they doing, what are they working on, I haven't seen an email from them, or can I go and check if they're logged on? We were trusting them, and we sort of had learned to manage people by the output and the objectives they were set, rather than sort of time watching and them telling us that they worked for 8 hours yesterday. So what, you worked for 8 hours yesterday, what were you actually doing for 8 hours? And I think the biggest problem or challenge we faced was actually working and interfacing to other teams outside of the data team, whether they're people we ordinarily interact with, or because of the crisis, teams that we didn't ordinarily interact with, and who were not used to working in this way. And actually, we found that some of the biggest challenges. So we might be happy working somewhere. We might be using all the collaboration tools that we've had available to us and SharePoint and doing all this sort of stuff. But you're then working with some teams who actually, despite us all having in theory the same equipment and same sort of strategy around agile working, some teams had never ever worked from home, other than, oh, on a Saturday, can you just test something for an hour because we're going live with something new? So you imagine going from interacting with people who are not used to being in a strange environment, they've got their kids running around trying to do homeschooling. So actually, I think we found that our biggest challenge was working with other teams.
And how's that progressed over the last few weeks? Are people being more comfortable? Are people becoming more like you, I suppose, or the other way around?
Yeah, I think you probably meet somewhere in the middle, and certainly in the beginning, I probably got a bit frustrated because I've been working in a flexible agile way for 15 plus years, since I worked for an organization that rolled it out across the company. And when you're interacting with lots of individuals and teams who aren't used to it, you suddenly realize that no point you sit in there getting frustrated that they're not working in the same way as you are, and they don't have a full home office set up with a 85-inch screen behind them like I do. I'm clearly not. I'm in the office today, but not everyone has that capability, and so you have to realize that when you're having a phone call with them and you've called them on Teams out of the blue, they might be in the middle of homeschooling. I'm lucky that I've got a qualified teacher downstairs doing homeschooling as well as doing her job. I'm pretty lucky. There aren't many people that have got that. I only get called in when the maths question gets too hard for them. And otherwise I can sit upstairs and do my data job and lead my data team in pretty much perfect isolation. That you're interacting with people and you're suddenly finding out their own personal circumstances, and you're having to adjust how you interact with them, how you maybe push them for, like, I really need this from you because I can't do my piece of the project, for example. Particularly as some of the things and requests we got in the first few weeks were things that we were less, I don't say less familiar with, but we hadn't done it before. So we needed to go and get our own internal data. We needed a bit of external data. We needed another piece of data from somewhere else in the organization. And you suddenly realize you're interacting with someone who says, I'll try, but I've got to do some homeschooling for 2 hours in the middle of the morning because my wife's got to do her job, and he's saying, oh, right, yeah, forget that. You're not like me where I've got a teacher downstairs that is getting on with it and letting me work 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate enough to have a qualified teacher downstairs as well. Otherwise, I'm not sure what on earth would be happening right now, for example. So excuse any noise that you might hear. You must be doing a few things differently, though, Graham. Is there anything you've been forced to do, in terms of collaboration? And presumably you can't do face-to-face meetings, for example. Is there anything that you've been forced to do that you look ahead and think, do you know what? We might actually carry on doing that. This worked quite nicely.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a couple of things. So just briefly touch upon sort of external. So I myself and probably other senior data leaders, network and attend various events. And if you're working in London in particular, it's not uncommon to go to, or maybe it's just me, goes to sort of like, 1 or 2 a week, and actually suddenly realized that those meets, I think they stopped for a little bit, but after a few weeks, they adopted, a virtual culture. And actually, for some of them that I've been going to on a face-to-face basis, take the beer and the snacks out of it, and I've got more out of the virtual meetup because of the way in which you can use things like Zoom technology and break out into groups and meet people that you wouldn't otherwise meet because it just randomly puts you into groups. So I've met more people, learnt more in the virtual groups externally than I probably would have done in the face-to-face ones for the last year or so. And I think internally you get something similar by the adoption of the technology. So we moved to Office 365. With that you get Teams. We'd used Skype before, but people frankly shied away from Skype and some of the other technology and would phone each other. And now the advent of the video thing, because it's more than just a telephone call, because actually I can see your facial expression, so I can see when you want to talk, when you want to interrupt. When you're looking puzzled because you're thinking, I don't understand you. And so I think we've learned to balance when should it be a phone call, when should it be a video call, when should it be an email, and so we've learned more of that internally, rather than when you're sitting in an office, you might always go and email the person, or you might always go and see them. And some people fall into those two black and white camps. A lot of data teams tend to be very introverted and will tend to email everybody everything. They'll even email you across the desk to ask you, is it okay if I go to lunch early? And going, just speak to me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I've heard a lot of people who have become sort of video converts as a result of this. People who haven't used video calling, or have shied away from it, or deliberately turned the camera off when they're doing a video, doing a conference call with other people, are now, actively encouraging it, I suppose, with the lack of social contact. I mean, it's kind of quite welcome now, isn't it? If not the call every week with your parents, Zoom call.
But maybe you have to be aware though that not everyone is comfortable with it, are they? And I think certainly as data leaders, you have to be aware in your team that some people will be less comfortable with it, and even you may not be that comfortable, but you've had to be, because back to my point that a lot of data people tend to have come from a very technical background, tend not to be comfortable in front of video, in front of other people, and they've got to this leadership position, and actually they've sort of got to lead from the front, lead by example. And you've got Tom and Dave in the corner without their video cameras on. Now, do you demand they put them on, or do you just ask the question saying, okay, can I just ask you why you didn't put the videos on this morning in the meet? Because that meet was the equivalent of us round a table in the office. And sometimes, I asked a question early on of a couple of people, and they said, I had a bad hair day. And this was a bloke, and I was like, actually, it's fair enough. Actually, what he's saying is, I wasn't feeling it. So why should I force him to say, these type of meetings, you must be on video?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I have heard examples of people now doing enforced video sort of team meetings and stuff like that. And I kind of wondered the instances like that where there is going to be the odd time where people have real legitimate reasons why they wouldn't want to do it. So yeah, I mean, in terms of moving ahead, then we talked about your the first question was kind of what was the thing that you were most worried about in terms of the whole lockdown coming. Is there similar things for your team in kind of bringing everybody back again? Is there obviously systems and stuff should still work, and the office is it should still be fine and stuff like that. I mean, what's sort of front of mind for you as a data leader getting everybody back?
I think I've sort of had to go to my calendar to count up the weeks, because I don't know about you, but I've lost track. You said 21st, 22nd, 23rd of March. I'm going, no, it's ingrained in my mind. It was the 23rd of March, which for those who don't follow the press is because actually that was coincided with the same day that Addison Lee changed hands. So its investors sold it to a new bunch of investors. They arrived on the Monday. We'd all pretty much moved to work from home the previous week. So they literally walked in, looked around and went, we've got a 300-seater office with nobody here. Where is everybody? I mean, clearly they had been told we're working from home, but I don't think they even quite realised everybody was working at home when they arrived in the building on Monday. So 23rd of March is sort of extra. The week before, even though we hadn't been asked to or ordered to send my data team home on the, I think from the 16th they were home. So Thursday, Friday, the week before that. So what's that, the sort of 13th or something, was the last time all the data team were together face to face in our office, and we had a team meeting. And I think so you count forward and go 10 weeks. That's a long time. And so bearing in mind that we took advantage of the government scheme and furloughed a chunk of people. We're a travel transport related business. Anyone in that area. So airlines, holiday companies. They were hit hardest. They've furloughed the most number of people. And I was thinking, sort of like in the last couple of weeks, that we've been keeping the lights on, but we've also been delivering change projects and updating things like metadata and changing some definitions of things, and suddenly thought, you know what? we do need to tell the people when they come back from furlough, which could be a couple of weeks, it could be another month. We're still deciding once the Chancellor makes the new plans for the extension known as to when is it we're going to unfurlough, who are we going to unfurlough first. Actually, we've got quite a lot to tell them, because during the furlough, they're not allowed to work. They don't have access to their corporate email. You're only allowed to have a conversation with them about the furlough scheme. We have a bit of a social, so we keep in contact with them socially and just sort of, have a chat about, what they've been doing the weekend. But, we can't talk about work to them, and we don't talk to them about work, and they can't do any. But actually, when they come back in, it could be 3 months. And we need to tell them that we've changed the definition of something. We've got this new data table. We've actually changed the process, because the group that have left can't just, not change anything. We're not a production line of just, like a photocopier. We're changing bits of the photocopier and producing different bits of paper, and things are coming out of different orifices. And we need to tell the new people the existing people when they come back.
Yes. I suppose that's something that you wouldn't have thought or ever had to have.
It's like having a new employee.
Yes. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. Almost like a reinduction plan kind of thing.
Yeah. So we start giving a note of all those things we need to tell them.
Yes. Yeah. No. Exactly. Well, it's a weird time, I suppose, because sort of classic business continuity. I remember speaking to someone on the first webinar. Classic business continuity looks at one of four things. Inability to provide your service anymore. Changes to staff, losing technology or systems. Losing your location. And it's effectively, for the majority of people anyway, they've kind of lost all four at the same time. So coming back from that, there is got to be a kind of a plan, I guess.
Yeah.
I suppose you kind of touched on one, and it does feel the wrong word to use in terms of any positives, because obviously anything that's come out that hasn't been negative, I suppose, maybe neutrals even. But you said about your interactions with other teams seem to have it maybe even improved to a certain extent. And a bit more kind of empathy between the teams, and moving more towards each other in terms of communication. Is there anything else that you can say that you as a data team have got out of this period, aside from just coming out the other side?
I think we obviously had a perfect storm for us, which is a change of ownership, and that was effectively a sort of a new board of directors, simultaneously with a significant impact on the business, that says suddenly there's a demand on the services. So when, bear in mind, in that first week, we were asked to make a decision on how many and who we needed to furlough. And I'm thinking, how do I make a prediction of demands on us from other areas? Because if I just take that first week, was that a good indication of the demand I'm going to see next week and the week after? And it was all a bit of a gamble, if I'm honest, because you can't exactly say, well, I look back at the last time this happened. And yes, let's be honest, most leaders sort of go by what happened before, what they think will happen in the future, and you've got nothing to go on. So I think maybe one of the things we've learned is, so data people go, well, I rely on data. Well, sometimes the data isn't lots and lots of rows and columns. Sometimes it's looking at the environment, judging the people, judging the situation, and that's your data. And also talking to, for me, because of the meetups were still going on in a few areas, actually talking to other data professionals in particular and understanding what they were experiencing. So you had people who were in industries almost completely unaffected to some extent, or they were positively affected, or equally different industries that were negatively affected, and just how they were coping and what they were doing made you realize actually it was really important to have that external set of network contacts when you go into this unknown. So for me, talking to people like Jez about what's going on in the data recruitment market, what are other companies doing, gave me a sense of, okay, we're doing a similar thing. Sometimes that's not a bad thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's I'm going to leave it there with you for the moment, Graham, if that's okay. I think we'll come back to you at the end with some more general questions. But I was going to fire it over to you, Jez, if that's okay. I believe you've got a couple of slides and some stats and facts about the recruitment, jobs, careers market that you've been unearthing over the last few weeks.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to share a couple of slides really with a few points. More about getting people to think, a little bit of insight into what we're seeing. So I'll just pull these up now for you. Let's just try that like that. Share, and hopefully everybody can see that. So the job market and the effects of the actual lockdown itself. So I think everybody is very aware that there was a huge decrease in permanent contract hiring across the board. I mean, that's for every industry initially, and then we've seen an increase in the healthcare sector and a couple of others. But overall, you know, anywhere, there's different reports on statistics where it could be between 40 and 60% decrease since lockdown. But what we have seen, and I said this in the first lockdown webinar we did together, was we have seen some stability on the contract side for data transformation and enablement. So those businesses that had critical projects which were going through a transformation actually move some expenditure internally, whether it might be from operational into CapEx, enabling them to carry on some of the projects, which has sustained a slightly better position for contract than it has for permanent in the last few months. So, you know, that's something tangible that I know that us as a business can support, because we've actually had business on the contract side for data projects. Interestingly, though, with the recruitment side, you know, the adoption of virtual recruitment throughout this period is almost been, well, it's been very alien to many, because there are a large number of startups and companies that are quite used to using this type of technology and also collaborating in this way and have remote working environments and everything else. For other businesses, they can do the first part of that process quite simply and quite comfortably, but where it has slowed down some of the recruitment process for any jobs that, any vacancies that were still live, the process is slowed down at the end and at the later stages, because often there's a final interview where someone wants to meet someone face to face, and we've experienced customers where they've said no, that still needs to happen even if there's social distancing, and or people have, you know, taken longer to make the decision as to whether or not they feel comfortable about doing it. So the word I would use really would be caution. They've been a little bit more cautious about how they go about it, which can, whilst the jobs are still live and they're still trying to fill them, has slowed things down somewhat. So that's been a bit of an effect of the lockdown. On a more positive note, actually, from some of the statistics I've looked at in the last few days, the short-term demand for permanent hiring staff has actually risen in the last month. So the actual confidence from businesses regarding their actual ability to hire feels like it's been rebooted. So I wouldn't say that it's positive now, but it's certainly moving in the right direction. It's still negative, but it is actually improving. And what we're also seeing is a slight shift in skills and focus. And the reason behind that is because everybody's, on my personal opinion, is a lot of the expectation of how the market will operate in the future and companies will work together means an adoption or a requirement for a different set of skills post lockdown as we come out of it. So if we think about workplaces, and I actually I've read a few reports on skills for the future and what we think that will look like, what the expectation will be. As workplaces change, and we're not saying every workplace will change, but I think we all know things will definitely operate differently. Businesses will have an expectation of people to be very adaptable and flexible about how they go about their working life. So going back to Graham's point, you know, really interesting there. There was a team there that were very used to working in that way, but the moment they start interacting with other teams who are not used to remote working, using collaborative tools and video calls and everything else, that's been quite hard for them to adapt to. And of course, if you're not flexible to adapt to it, then it could cause some challenges for the future. Very fair to say that tech savviness, or being able to utilize technology in this new potential world that we might be looking at, bearing in mind that the adoption of a digital or data transformation project for companies is high on the radar, if not already in full swing or nearly done. The expectation that candidates in the future will have a very, very good skills in technology, whether it's coding or anything else really, but that will be an expectation. So being able to use collaborative software, and we know some of the big players on the market that offer that, is going to be essential. Interesting in this next point, human creativity and innovation. What we mean by that, I could actually give an example with the recruitment industry itself. Recruitment industry has always relied on the recruiters to be doing a lot of the interaction with the candidate, i.e. with screening and managing the process and checking in and that engagement between all the parties. Well, there's a lot of AI and machine learning tools and models out there that are now starting to do a lot of the matching from the recruitment perspective. However, the ability to be creative and innovate around that with potential new products or managing that process is highly important. So you can't just rely on one or the other. So, people that are creative, and we've said this about data science, for example, where storytelling in the last 12 months has become an actual skill set. It's an attribute that businesses expect from people in that role. So that's kind of makes sense to me anyway, but something that people should be thinking of. Data literacy. What we're talking about there is everybody in an organization as we move forward should have an understanding as to why the data is so important in the business, but also understanding that it's the only way that they're going to be able to make better decisions, or at least have their input or give their communication around better decision making within the teams that they work. So data literacy is very high on the radar already, but certainly will become at the forefront for the future. Critical thinking, the ability to work out in a short space of time what's actually good, what's right, which is the right way forward based on the information that they have, will be a key attribute moving forward. Coding skills, as I mentioned, with tech savviness. We can talk about Python and R and a ton of languages, but people that have got skills who are able to program, certainly for more technical roles, that's still always going to be high, especially as companies move forward and become totally data enabled, where they've got a digital platform or digital culture and the way that they work. That's going to be critical. And leadership. I think Vic might talk more about this, but in a non-hierarchical environment, which is where I think we expect things to move forward to as well from a cultural perspective. People will be leading more people in agile teams, and they'll be doing that at different times. So anybody that shows any flair or has an interest in doing that, I think that's going to be something that we should think about now. Have we got the experience? What have we learned from it? What can we do better? Because you might be in that kind of position in the future. So there's just, I didn't want to talk about specific technical skills today, more about highlighting some of the areas where we should all start to try and do some personal development and learn over these next 3 to 6 months. And I think that will make people much more employable as we move forward and companies change. Last slide here. The challenges, I think, leaders, people like, in Graham's position and other data leaders or anybody in a leadership position, the industry is definitely gearing up for a new generation or a change of the way it works. So therefore skills, and their focus will be around skills and operating models, basically, how they work and what skills they will expect people to have. But from a leadership perspective, they're going to need to be very varied, have a varied skill base and be more people focused. Because some of the workforce planning and organizational line that's going on at the moment, I think will present a number of different challenges about how they structure teams as they move forward. So there's been Graham said, with companies furloughing so many people, there's been a big drive on internal mobility, so people moving around to be able to plug the gaps. Well, as we move into this new sort of era, I think what will happen there is that the way that you structure those teams will change. So there will be workforce challenges, and leaders that understand that well will do very well. That leads me on to we've actually had this personally, I know I have when I've spoken to customers. The need for very, very strong project management skills is high up on the radar. People that can matrix manage other people, manage workflow, manage milestones and all that sort of stuff. That's high up there on the radar. People that have back well-being within companies that are able to promote and help build a culture that supports well-being will be very, very important. Leaders that are able to deal with disruption in the organization, because what they knew then as they move forward and what might be the strategy of the business and how they wish to change, it will cause some disruption. We know that. So a leader that can deal with that is key. I think maybe Vic will talk a bit more about this, but more companies will be working in the agile way. Graham's been working in agile for 15 years or whatever, but there are a ton of people that aren't, who are in leadership positions, and I've spoken to many of those over the last 3 to 6 months. I really can't see many functional silos operating in the future. Be much more agile working for all businesses, which supports the way they operate regardless. More communication around the sharing the purpose and values of the organization, because when you aren't perhaps in one place at one time, where you might need to structure how you're communicating what your objectives and strategy are as a business or a leader, you'll be doing that in a very different way, but highly important for employee engagement when companies are working very differently. So they're just the main things that I wanted to share today, Andy, just to put some thought around these particular topics.
Cool.
So I'll stop there, and I think if you've got any questions.
Thanks. Oh, no, I've got one actually. I'll probably ask more questions at the end once we've heard from Vic, because obviously I'm keen to let her have a say. But I was just one question I had for you. There's probably quite a number of managers or directors or your team leaders or whatever who've never recruited anybody that they've never met. I imagine the vast majority of people have seen them face to face, done the whole dress up in a suit thing, shaking hands, that kind of thing, maybe a presentation. I don't know. How are people getting over this? Like, people are normally quite stuck in their opinions and stuff like this, but how are people getting over this kind of thing? And are they just being silly, for example?
No, I honestly, sometimes things happen where you're forced into a situation, and I think that's what lockdown has done. It's forced people to actually adopt a different way of moving forward. Otherwise, they can't achieve the objective. And if that is to build a team right now or to deliver on a project or whatever it might be, it's something that has to be done. I think that if honest, it will be fairly slow initially over the first couple of months, but I think then we're going to see a very, very steep up curve of the adoption of this is the new way of working. This is the new way of recruitment. It's supported by AI and everything else, and a lot of it will be done through this platform. Traditional ATS systems or applicant tracking systems that companies have used they don't really integrate that well typically with what will be the new technology moving forward. So I think we'll see a whole wave of this is the new norm. I hate to say it, but this is the new norm of how we go recruiting. Sorry, Graham. That's actually what I think.
Perfect. Thank you, Jez. I don't think we were talking about this earlier about the phrase "the new normal" and unprecedented. I don't think I've said unprecedented yet, although admittedly I have just said it twice. You'll have to, if anyone who's picked me up on that, they can send it through in the comments afterwards. But finally, I'd like to welcome Vic on to share her thoughts. So take it away, Vic.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me as well. So yeah, I'm Vicky. I work for a company called Clarisys. We're a business consultancy with offices in London and Boston, and I'm one of 3 HR people partners. I'm also the wellbeing lead for the company. So I thought it might be useful to share a little bit about Clarisys' journey through COVID-19 so far, but particularly from a wellbeing perspective. So our primary focus has really been on how do we come through this together as a team, and not losing anybody in the process. So how do we avoid having to make redundancies further down the line? How do we maintain the fantastic culture that we've worked really hard to build over the last 9 years throughout this process? And how do we support our employees from a wellbeing perspective? And of course, at the end of this, how do we come out of this, return to some form of normal, whatever that might be, and unlock down? So in terms of coming through this as a team, we made some difficult decisions early on around furloughing people quite early, temporary pay cuts. We also implemented a financial assistance program for our employees to help them with those decisions that we had to make. Our CEO hosts a weekly Q&A call, which provides a continuing forum for employees to raise their questions and concerns, which I think is really important, that you give your people different forums in which to raise those questions and concerns. And then the other thing that we did pretty much from day dot was we set up what we call our COVID hub, which is basically an intranet that groups together all of the info and comms, useful links for our employees relating to the current situation. So that's really easily accessible for all. We split it into different areas, focusing on providing useful information and support from different angles. So there's a page dedicated to our people, to our clients, to our business, to furlough and to wellbeing. So just coming back to culture and some of the principles that we've tried to maintain throughout in order to maintain our culture. So one of the things that we do is we emphasize productivity over actual hours worked. So we feel that builds a culture of trust and understanding, and unlike conventional culture of supervision, which embraces fear rather than motivation. So we found that just trusting our employees to produce and focusing on the outputs rather than the hours that people are inputting really works for us. So also finding what are the good communication tools for us in this climate. We were very lucky. We were already using Zoom a lot. We use Google, we use Padlet, Trello. That really helps us with collaboration and keeping our employees connected. We don't force any certain schedule on people, so we recognise that everybody is different and productive in different hours. So use that to your advantage. Give people the autonomy to complete their work in their own schedule, and particularly those working from home and juggling work with childcare commitments and other commitments. It does mean that our people have had to change their working hours. And have trust in your team. Don't try to overpower people with hierarchy. Building trust really does prove for sort of better outcomes. Make sure that your people know the why of the company, and even better, make sure that they're part of identifying that why. A huge part of company culture is the mission, so make sure that your people understand how what they do contributes to achieving that overall organisational goals. And importantly, keep the fun stuff going. We noticed in the first kind of 2 to 3 weeks that it was a lot of doom and gloom. We were delivering bad news and it all looked quite glum. So we found it really important to inject more of the fun stuff again. So celebrate the successes, conduct virtual socials. We have a good coaching and buddy set up that's really working to support people as well. We've also had our guys have been doing daily lockdown videos. Some of that kind of words of wisdom, sharing experiences, sharing knowledge. But there's a lot of fun stuff, like we've had dancing, we've had the cinnamon challenge, weird stuff like that. But it's really helped to keep us connected and give us a good laugh. We've had jokes, meme of the day, all of that sort of thing. People really appreciate seeing those things coming through, and all of those things go towards supporting culture. For me, the key thing that stood out throughout the whole process so far at our organisation is the ongoing transparency from everyone really, but particularly from our senior leadership team. We don't just tell our employees what they want to hear. We don't hide the bad stuff. So our people feel that they are in the know. We consider all options and we consult our people before making key decisions, which really helps with getting their buy-in, and particularly when it is difficult decisions that we're making. And I think being open and honest about how and why tough decisions have to be made helps to support the culture and to reduce uncertainty. And uncertainty, I think, is something that we've all struggled with from one angle or another over the last 10, 11 weeks, 2, 3 years, whatever it's been so far. And it's something that I personally really value about the Claris's culture. So then, from a well-being perspective, I mean, well-being is such a huge topic, and we don't have the time today to go into the graphic detail that I would absolutely love to. But do reach out if you want to connect on a one-to-one basis. Well-being has always been a high priority agenda item for us, and it's so important now more than ever to focus on how we can best support our people. If we don't invest time and energy into doing this, then I really believe it is the business that suffers. So it's really important. We've all had to adapt very quickly to so much change and uncertainty, and people's ability to cope with that change differs vastly. People have different needs in terms of support, and those needs can change from day to day. So it's really important that we're on top of that. At Claris's, we conduct regular one-to-one catch-ups, check-ins. We conduct team check-ins. We continue to probe people in order to understand how people are really feeling and what their needs are. And as I say, those needs change from day to day. And the truth is that even with a strong positive culture, people are reluctant to ask for help without some gentle encouragement. So make sure you're asking your people how they are, and keep asking, ask again, and give them different forums in which they're able to be open, because they might be more comfortable talking to one person and not so much somebody else. So give them different people and different forums to reach out to. As I mentioned earlier, we've had to furlough a large percentage of our workforce, and we recognise the impact that can have on people's well-being. And so, aside from the more obvious concerns people tend to have around being furloughed, for our people, something that's really come through is the concern around halted development and a time lapse in opportunities to further progress their career. That's something that they're really worried about. And so we have a head of L&D who's been working really hard to make available to those people training opportunities that they can do whilst on furlough that will go in support of their career at the point that we bring them back from furlough. 90% of our furloughed people are also using their skills and their knowledge in a pro bono capacity with various different charities, and they're doing consulting type work. So that's great. They're continuing to develop their skills, and we actively support that. And of course, those that aren't are also taking up L&D type opportunities. With regards to the people that haven't been furloughed, we haven't assumed that they're fine because they haven't been furloughed. I think we need to recognise that there is potentially an added pressure on those people who are still working to keep the company going and to get us through to the other side. So we're keeping in regular contact with them to understand what their needs are and to monitor any increase in stress levels that might be happening. So we're actually running a workshop next week on managing stress and helping people with that as well to avoid burnout. And lastly, the other thing that we're also launching next week is our Wellbeing Cafe. And so that's basically a weekly Zoom slot where people can dial in. We'll be discussing various wellbeing related topics voted for by our people. So we've got on the agenda things like sleep, nutrition, mental health being a big one for us, separating work from home life, resilience, building resilience, dealing with uncertainty. The list goes on. And my role within that is to facilitate those conversations and workshops with a view to learning from each other ways in which we can address common wellbeing related challenges. So that's just kind of in a nutshell some of the things that we've been doing that have really helped us. Of course, now we're looking to unlockdown and how we sort of safely come out of this. So we've already got a plan in place to start adjusting our office to ensure safety of our people when they return, saying that we don't intend to be among the first wave of returners, as we've been able to prove that we can successfully work from home, and that's worked really well for us. And that's it really from me.
Thanks, Vic. No, I was going to turn to some questions for you four now, to conclude the programme, really, to take us up to time. We've got one for Jez about what's in demand at the moment. I suppose we've been concentrating on other aspects and negative impacts, perhaps. I mean, is there any markets you're finding having an upturn for people desire for employment or whatever?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. It's quite high on the radar for many people that are job seeking at the moment. There hasn't been from not me personally, but from the team, our team at Eden Smith, I'd say there hasn't been much of a change with regards to. There's still a high demand for people with good analytical skills. We can't avoid the fact that COVID has caused a massive put a massive radar on data science, for example, and what's happening, because the whole country wants to know exactly what's going on. So large farmers, big healthcare companies, they want to understand and analyze the data that they have. So data analysis and business analysis, requirements gathering, and that sort of thing is quite high up there, as data science still is as well. And what I mean by that, we've seen a huge drop in the market, but around those areas, which I believe is more active at the moment, outside of something. If I looked at skills as put them into some kind of segmentation, so data management, architecture, engineering, science analytics, architecture might not be so quite busy right now as what data science is, for example. Data science has always been high on the radar for the last couple of years, but even in this particular situation. So I think analytical skills, even as one particular technical skill, SQL coding, SQL development, etc., is still high in demand.
Excellent. We've got a question through about sort of social distancing, and obviously it's going to be compulsory, I imagine, to have it in workplaces once people start returning. So I'll put a slightly different slant on it. I'll start with you, Jez, I suppose, being the sort of CEO of a recruitment company. How's social distancing with your team going to affect you? There will be a point where people come back to work in the office. They'll probably everybody will have to stand 2 meters apart. I mean, how's that going to affect you? Are you going to have less people in at once, or?
So, I mean, I'll be completely transparent. We're looking at a real revamp of our operating model anyway. What this has done, we always had 50% of our team remote working anyway, and we had a core sales team in London. This has definitely proved to me, and more so my business partner, actually, that you don't need to do that. And of course, there is a positive cost benefit from not having fixed office. So actually, what we're looking at and what we're planning for is more of a flexible location in a city which we can dip in and out of in the week to get the team together, to socialise with them, to meet customers face to face when we can do that, albeit might be at social distance. But that will be the way we're going to handle that. I can't see us having to do too much office adaptation to accommodate social distancing for Eden Smith, if being truthful.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be a massive challenge for lots of companies. I respect if Graham and Vic, you can't comment on that because you're not part of the particular team that's going to be involved with delivering that challenge. But no, jump in if you like to before I ask the next question.
Yeah, I mean, I am working with the what we call our business hub team, which is mainly built up of the ops people. So I'm aware of some of the plans that we have in place. Our office suits us well for a one-way system, so that's something that we're going to be implementing in the office, which will allow for social distancing. We've worked out what our kind of maximum capacity for our office space is, bearing in mind the 2-metre distance, and we're looking at desk dividers, screens. We'll be closing off the kitchen for a period of time in order to adhere to what we think will be the guidance when we can go back. So yeah, we're moving towards it.
Yeah, perfect.
I think for us, we're as you can see, I am in the office, and actually, I think I was less worried about I'm in the office and what's it going to be like, more how am I going to get there. And so actually we've just done a survey recently to all staff to get them to talk about how would they feel about coming back, how would they get back, how would they change how they travel, and then how they feel about when they're in the office. Now, we've only required the senior management team to come back, so on a few days a week. So on any one day, I haven't seen more than 15 of us in an office that can cater for 300, that is open plan, very modern. I mean, the building's probably 15 years old. It had a complete refit before we moved in. So it's lots of collaborative spaces and benches and things. So doing the 2 meters, whatever, is very easy. It's more about the getting in and out.
Yeah.
How are you going to travel? So if you're a London business, you've probably got predominantly a lot of your workforce have to come on a tube, probably, or bus. I'm quite lucky. I live probably the furthest out of all of my team, and lots of other teams. But actually, I can drive into the office. I can park in the underground car park in the hotel opposite, and that is about the same price as my daily season ticket equivalent would be. Except the difference is it takes me 3 hours round trip, and ordinarily it would take me 2 hours, and I'd spend those 2 hours on social media, emails, other things.
Yeah, no, quite. Well, there's a question to you, Vic, here about I suppose different profiles of people that you're dealing with. It's asking specifically about sort of tech and data teams. Are they coping better? I'm guessing that it's, rather than from a wellness perspective, perhaps more of a engaging with the new systems and collaboration tools and stuff like that. Are you finding the more technical employees managing better, or does it not really seem to matter?
To be honest, in our organisation, no, it doesn't seem to matter. We're using all of the same tools that we were using prior to this, so and they're working really well for us. I guess the thing that we've struggled with probably the most from a tools perspective is the best tools in which to facilitate workshops. Our guys facilitate a lot of workshops with our clients, and we're currently looking at what are the best tools to enhance that experience and really make it work as best as it can for us under the current circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, I think it made a big difference that so many companies have kind of invested in these kind of collaboration things. Admittedly, a lot of people use of things like Teams and other products as from other vendors has skyrocketed since this has happened. But the fact that they had them and they had some sort of policy and people had access to them even if they weren't using them has really kind of helped everybody. I imagine that kind of usage of that kind of technology is gone mad. I thought I'd end with a couple of kind of general questions. At the beginning, when I was speaking to Graham, we kind of wound back to the 23rd of March. I suppose what I'd want to do is wind forward. I suppose that's not a concept, so apologies to any kind of physicists on the call. It's just sort of look forward to a point where we are out of where some of these restrictions are being relaxed, even the 2 meter one, and things like that, and people are either immune or got access to some sort of vaccine, and things are looking more normal. Do you think things will go back to how they were? Do you think they'll be the same, or do you think we are, the world of work, or the world of work for data teams is totally different now? Sorry, I'll go to you, Jez, first. Sorry, we'll do it.
No, I honestly believe that there's a global change happening for the way we all work. I think over the last, whether you're in a data team or a tech team or a, whatever, in whatever industry you work, I think if it's an office-based job, I think those that have experienced either furlough or remote working in these last 12 weeks have a preference. I would say there's a large percentage have a preference for doing so, because personally, and I don't know about anybody else on the call, but getting up slightly later, so extra sleep, less travel, being more productive, a bit more focus, flexible working day, it's extremely attractive to most. So there will be, as we pull out of this, I believe, a disconnect between the employee and the employer about how they want to move forward. And we'll see a lot of movement. I would say that's in the staffing industry, but I think we will see a lot of movement between those that are more traditional and like to be in the office will move to the businesses that still want to operate in that way, versus others know that's a much more agile working culture in that business. And that's what I've realized. I actually quite like that in the last 2 or 3 months. I've learned a lot of technology. I've personally developed. I feel better in myself, and that's what I think that we will see, because I think there's been a large adoption of a change in companies moving forward.
Cool. And I'd go to you, Graham, next, if that's okay. I'm working around my screen.
Yeah, I suppose I saw a sort of chart last night that showed the FTSE 100 over the last where it is 30 or 40 years, and it had the crash of 1990, 2000, 2010, and then said 2020. And he said, but actually the previous 3 were financial crashes, really caused by financial overload. The 2020 was not a financial overload, and so to assume that because in the past it goes back to normal eventually, that it will just go back to normal now. I sort of agree with Jez that actually I think there will be a sort of a compromise somewhere between. It says people who want to go back to the way it was will end up going more towards those companies that want to carry on operating in that way, or maybe have to operate in that way, and other people will start moving towards other companies saying they're much more open and flexible, and there's a lot more of them. So I can choose what role and company that I go towards, and they'll be coming to Jez and say, I want a role in this type of company, not based on industry sector or the latest fancy thing they're doing with data. They might sit and pitch up and say, this is the environment, this is the type of people that I want to work with, rather than the traditional of here's my skill set and I want to do financial services or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Vic, from your perspective, not necessarily company's perspective, I suppose, do you think that things are going to return to normal once we for everybody once we come out of this?
I think our day-to-day kind of interactions with people will return to normal eventually, but I echo a lot of what Jez said around the positive impact that we're realizing through this home working, the positive impact that it's having on our well-being. So whilst there are a lot of things that we need to be concerned about from a well-being perspective, actually there's an opportunity here to really recognise all of the good things that are coming with this. So Jez mentioned about no more early starts, that kind of 2-hour rush in the morning. I personally had a 2-hour journey to work. I now have 4 extra hours in my day to do what I want. I'm finding that I'm much more productive because I'm not getting as many interruptions. So I can see us generally moving towards more home working and more flexibility around how, when, and where we work.
Perfect. And I'll keep this last question short and sharp, because I think we're approaching the witching hour in terms of time. So again, assuming that we're at this point where everything's returned to normal, what is everyone looking forward to doing most from a work sort of perspective, or in a work setting, be it kind of social or work related or whatever? I suppose I come to you first, Jez, then.
Someone said to me in our network that they can't wait to pay £8 for a pint of beer. And I just thought it was really interesting, because many of us do miss that face-to-face interaction. So, customer facing has always been part of my personal job for the last 20 years. So I have missed that. That for me would be great, but I think I'll schedule a day for doing that once a week rather than 5 lunchtime.
Graham, is there anything?
I'm afraid I'd have to say the same, which is, I look forward to the day I can meet up with Jez. He can buy me a pint for £8, and he can lose his keys again on the way home.
Oh dear, brilliant.
And Vic, you echoing that sentiment, or is there?
Yeah, I absolutely echo that. I'm looking forward to not having to look at my face on the screen for 5 minutes, just staring at a screen. And it'd be nice to interact with people and maybe even hug them at some point, face to face. So yeah, human interaction.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, well, he's looking forward to a time where all that's possible. And I'll have an £8 beer as well, Jez, if you're having that. Thank you very much.
I'll have a chat with him. He loves it when I expense it.
Well, perfect. I'd just like to say thank you to all the guests today. I thought that was a really, really interesting discussion. Lots coming out of it and stuff, and it's nice to look forward to as well. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. But from everybody here, it's goodbye, and thank you for attending. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, all.
Bye.
See ya.